So today's presentation, very excited to give you a preview of the brand new up-and-coming version of the BI Platform Support Tool, version 2.1. Just a quick legal disclaimer, and we'll get right into it. So today's agenda, this is going to be kind of a combination of slides, but really I want to focus on demoing the new client so that everybody can see the new functionality. So I'm going to try to get through the slides pretty quick, and then we'll move straight into the demo. I'll talk about the architecture, how does the platform support tool work. Also, I want to talk about the new feature called Predictive Support Alerts. And then we'll do a demo, followed up by covering what was added in the new version, and talk about the future functionality that we're working on. At the end, there will be a chance for you to ask questions, so please prepare your questions. So yeah, we're going to give you a quick overview if you're new to the tool. We're going to take a good look at the landscape analysis report and how it's useful for troubleshooting. And then we'll talk about the various tools that we provide that will make your life as a BI administrator much easier. And then we're going to take a look at the new features that are added in 2.1. So at SAP, we have the concept of supportability tools. So tools that we provide to make your life easier and to make solving issues easier. And for BusinessObjects BI platform, there's several different tools. So this slide is kind of an overview of the different tools that are provided by SAP. So the BI platform support tool is a totally free, very simple to use client. So our goal was to make a supportability tool that would be as simple as just downloading it and running it without much actual configuration. And the platform support tool provides a landscape analysis and alerting, a toolbox with various tools to help troubleshooting and also to make administration easier. We provide a change analysis feature so you can tell what's changed in your environment over time. And then also tools regarding end-to-end tracing to make that process a lot easier. The other option for monitoring is Interscope. So SAP has a partnership with Computer Associates, and we provide an Interscope monitoring platform for BI. So we've developed dashboards that you can use to monitor the various performance KPIs in your BI platform. And that's actually free with part of your support contract. And this is fairly simple to deploy. So really the difference here between the Interscope and Solution Manager is if you don't have a basis team, you don't have NetWeaver or BW, then you can deploy Interscope in a standalone mode so that you can do monitoring. And if you do have other SAP products, a large SAP landscape, then we do recommend that you use Solution Manager, which is actually built on top of Interscope and provides a whole another set of features like real-time alerting, end-to-end diagnostics tools, and business process monitoring. So who's actually using the platform support tool? Well, obviously support is using this heavily. So our goal is when you open up an incident with support and you provide the landscape analysis report, we already know everything that we need to know about your landscape, like what your landscape topology looks like, what settings you have, what versions, what patches you've applied. So the goal is we don't want to have the incident or the question ping pong when you open up an incident. We want to know everything about your environment and make sure that it's up to date. That way we can go straight into solving your problem. Administrators have been using the tool for the alerting functionality that comes built in. So we develop alerts that we know of known issues and best practices, and when you run the report, we provide alerts based on what we find in your landscape. Also, administrators have been using the change analysis to keep track of changes and also for tracing, providing those traces to support. Consulting has been using this to accelerate service delivery, so the sizing exercises and business process optimizations, go live checks. This tool really accelerates the gathering of information that's needed to deliver those services. And lastly, product development, or IMS. When we need to code a fix for you, it's really helpful to be able to have the data about your landscape so that we can provide a fix as soon as possible and do deeper root cause analysis. And since we've released the tool in 2014, we've had over 35,000 downloads. So thanks everybody for the past support, and it's been a great success so far. So in this section, we're going to talk about how does the tool actually work. So the client itself is developed on top of the SAP JVM 8. So no installation is required. So when you actually download the software from the Software Download Center, it just extracts the code, the Java code, and the SAP JVM. It doesn't actually install it into your client. So no installation is really required. It does only run on a 64-bit Windows client. However, on the BI platform side, the server side, any OS version that is supported for BI platform will work. Also, new in 2.1 is a Linux command line version. So if you have the case where you're running on Linux and you just want to run it from the command shell, you can do that now. And so the software itself has been available via the SAP Store and also the Software Download Center. And again, it's totally free to use in your environment. So in terms of communication and how we're collecting data, there's a few different data sources. So we connect to your CMS over the Corba connection. We connect to a host agent that you run on your server. It is optional, but if you have the host agent, we're getting the most amount of functionality and the most amount of information. And also for your Tomcat server, we connect to the JMX listener on your Tomcat server. These are the different analysis types that are included in the landscape analysis report. I won't go over each of these because we're going to demo that anyway. But I will point out that new in the 2.1 version is the BI applications analysis and also the timeouts analysis. And we'll take a look at that here in a couple minutes. So how do we actually collect the information? So there's two different steps or phases that happen when you run a landscape analysis report. There's the data extraction phase and the report generation phase. And the reason why it's decoupled is such that the data that's collected from the data extraction phase is portable. So you can take that information that's stored in an XML file and reopen it in a different client and regenerate the report based on that information. So when you run the report, you select what analysis types you want to report on. It connects to your CMS, and then you log in. Based on the CMS name, we look up the predefined landscape configuration that you've set up. That's stored in the Preferences XML in your roaming profile on the client. This way, you don't have to keep defining this over and over again. It's persisted. And then the data is collected from the various data sources from each of the nodes in your landscape. And then once the data is brought back, we evaluate all of the information that was collected and then apply the alerting thresholds. The alerts are stored on the client, and you can customize that, and I'll show you that here in a minute. We evaluate the alerts, and any alerts that are triggered are written into the stored landscape data. And then an XML file is created that stores all of the information. So when you go to view the data, we read in the data that's stored in locally on your client. Each of the reports or the analysis types in the landscape data is rendered into HTML or JavaScript, and JavaScript, so that we're using an HTML-based report so that it can be more interactive, and you can do kind of things that are dynamic, like filtering and changing the data, the way that you view the data. We generate charts using the BusinessObjects CVOM engine, so same charting engine that's in your Lumira and Webby Crystal Reports clients. And then you can open up more than one. You'll notice each report that's open is a separate tab in the client. And then when you start running reports, each of these is stored on your client in your roaming profile of your Windows user. And then these show up in the report history, so you can tell what reports have been run over time and what analysis types are included in the report. So the alerting, we have several different kinds of alerts, especially in 2.1. You'll notice some new alerts. Simple alerts are just a single alert with a single, basically, formula with a single threshold. So a property is greater than, less than a value. So that's a simple alert. What we found is, a lot of things that we want to alert on are more complicated than that. So we have something called system alerts. System alerts are actually hard-coded into the client. So we're doing the evaluations with Java code so that we can do really complex evaluations of the data. One thing that we added in this new version is the ability to enable or disable the system alerts or the hard-coded alerts, so that if you have an alert that you don't care about anymore, you can just disable that. And this system alerts, an example is a key code that might be expiring in 30 or 60, 90 days. We do checks to make sure that all of your nodes are the exact same patch level, or make sure that they're all running on the same SP. And in the new version, we're actually even comparing the web application version or build compared to your server version. So that's just an example of system alerts. Complex alerts is new to the 2.1 version, and what we've done here is allowed you to combine multiple simple alerts into a more advanced logic. So you could say, a server, if the server is of type adaptive processing server, and the name is, this, and the number of connections is greater than 20, or things like that, you can build up a more complicated alert that way. All of the alerts that you customize or create new are stored in the client in an XML file, so those will persist. And then when you view a report, the first thing that you'll see in the report is the alert summary. So all of the alerts that are triggered are the first thing that you'll see, and we'll take a look at that here in a minute. So in terms of persisting all of this information about your landscape, on your client, under your Windows user, in your roaming profile, there's a BI support tool folder, and in there is a preferences.xml, and this is where all of your landscape definitions, your data source information, and the predictive support alert settings are stored. So a quick look at the Linux command line version. So here everything it's very similar to the BusinessObjects BI platform shell scripts. So you run it from an SH or bash shell, and you have menu options, and you can create your landscape definition here, and then you can also and also run the report from here. So what you could do if you wanted to is create a cron job and schedule this inside of your Linux system, or you can just run it at the command line. When the report runs, you'll get some feedback on the console, and then you'll have your landscape report stored as a zip file on the file system or wherever you specify. So something new that we've been in beta for quite a bit, but with the release of the 2.1 platform support tool, this will be going live essentially, and it's called the Predictive Support Alerts. So what we want to be able to do is allow you to safely upload your landscape configuration to SAP, and with that data, we can actually we have the ability to determine what customers are susceptible to a particular issue. So one thing that we'll do is a hot new K-base comes in. We know this is a known issue. We can actually reverse engineer the criteria in the K-base and then query all the customers who are participating in predictive support alerts to see what customers this applies to, and then we can actually reach out to you before you even realize that there's an issue. We can let you know, hey, we've determined that your environment could be having this issue. Please refer to this SAP note or this K-base. It could also be useful in the case that maybe a new security vulnerability for Tomcat or whatever the case might be. We can target customers that are on a particular version and let you know ahead of time before you might even, before it becomes a big issue or before there's a system outage. So this is what the system looks like, the architecture. So from the client, you connect to SAP over a web service to the HANA Cloud platform. So we have a new service at SAP called Support Documents, and that is a cloud platform that allows customers to safely upload documents. Once it hits our HANA Cloud platform, the data is ETL'd into an internal BI system where we can run a number of queries to determine if you're suffering from a particular issue or you might be applicable to an issue, and then we can email you back directly with the solution. So just to show you kind of the technology behind this, we're using data services to consume the XML data, and then that's going into a database at the SAP side. And then if you do get an alert, it'll look kind of like this. You'll get an email with a PDF attached. So we're actually using Webby and Crystal Reports publications to generate the alerts. And then in the PDF will be the information about the alert. So it'll have information like what was the formula we used to determine that this was applicable, and then what is the issue and the solution. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the demo. So this is the new 2.1 client. You'll notice that we've updated the blog feeds to the new SCN community. So that's been updated. So we're actually aggregating all of the BI platform and analytics blogs here for you. And then for updates, we have our Twitter feed in here, so you can keep up to date on new versions of the platform tool. All of the BI-related support documentation is here, including downloads, so you can go straight into the service marketplace from here and grab the files that you need. So this is actually kind of like a browser here, just a quick way to get at information. Before I get into the landscape report, I want to show you some changes that we've made to the landscape configuration. So when you're creating your landscape definition, you'll notice some new options in here. One of the big things that we've changed is now all communication to the server can be SSL enabled. So previously we did allow Corba SSL, but you had to kind of add properties to a batch file and things like that. Now it's all built into the client. So you just add the properties there, save it, and then when you connect to that landscape, you'll be connecting over Corba SSL. And then we also have JMX SSL and host agent SSL. So you can configure that, and then that's configured under the Java SSL section. Another big change I want to point out is with the release of BI Platform 4.2 SP4, there's some compatibility issues with the Client Sdk and older versions of BI Platform. So in case you're having a newer version of BI Platform like 4.2 SP4 and an older version, we are now supporting backwards compatibility. And the way that we do that is by specifying the SDK version. So when you connect to the BI platform, we'll automatically detect the version and switch the SDK so that you can connect to older environments. So that'll happen automatically, or you can force a particular SDK version. And in terms of the landscape configuration, the rest is pretty similar. So when you add a landscape, you log in to your CMS, it detects your SIA nodes, and then you just come in here and then put in your host agent password. And then for your application server, you create a web application server node for each instance of the application server. Configure the host agent. These are the web application logging directories on the server, the local path on the server, and then your JMX settings. So here you can enable firewall support if you're connecting to Tomcat through a firewall. Once this is configured, then you're ready to run the report. To run a report, you go to Create Report, and then here you can choose what options you want to have in your landscape report. You'll notice the little gear symbol next to some of these. This means that additional configuration is required. So if it doesn't have this little symbol, then you can run these reports without the host agent or without JMX. If it has the little symbol, then you need to configure that before you can get to that report type. Something new also is top-in for schedule analysis. This was kind of a big request, so now you can choose a top-in value for your schedule analysis report. So rather than running a report and waiting, it does take a few minutes. We'll view an existing report. So when you view the report from the history, it's rendering the report now. Okay, so the first thing that you'll see is the alert summary. We have the version that is created in, the data date or the runtime date, and how long it took to run the report. And then you'll have your various alerts. So under system alerts, in this case, we can see quite a few have been triggered. We're doing things like checking best practices for your adaptive processing server split. So you can see the alert name, and then you can see what is the description of the alert and what is the recommendation. So here we say, the alert triggers if APS has all the default services, which is typically not a best practice, and then a link to a solution or a white paper. Another example of what we're doing is calculating all of the APSs running on a particular host and adding up the total maximum heap that you have set, and then comparing that to the total physical RAM that's on the box. So that way we know, in this case, we have 30 gigabytes worth of max heap defined, but only 16 gigabytes of RAM, and then we see a breakdown of the individual services that made up that maximum heap. So definitely we don't want to have more max heap set than we have physical memory available. We're doing other checks like Webby memory analysis, just best practices, available disk drive space, Lumira sizing checks, checks for timeout consistency. These are just ones that are triggered in this report. Now, you'll notice in the new version of 2.1, the alerting has its own menu item here, and you can see here all of the alerts that are defined. So these are all the things that are being checked in the landscape report when it's executed. You can see there's a number of different things like BOTrace is set to keep an infinite number of log files. You can run out of disk space. various logging things have been left on, tracing, platform search checks, missing startup command lines. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in here now, and for each version we keep adding new alert checks. So this is the simple alerts or user alerts. Complex alerts. So here we're checking the number of auditing events in the queue. We could see if it's a job server, we check the auditing metrics, the current number of auditing events. If it's greater than 1,000, then we throw an alert. So with the complex alerts, we can actually add additional threshold values. So we could say adaptive job server, metrics, concurrent jobs is greater than 10. So just as an example of how you can extend existing alerts, or you can click add and create new alerts. And then system alerts, these are the more complex alerts that are hard-coded. So in case there's an alert that keeps triggering that you know, okay, we're aware of this, we don't want to see this anymore, just come in here and change it to false for enabled, save that, and then you won't see that alert anymore. Okay, so let's go back to the report here. Complex alerts, we can see this Lumira server is missing the use concurrent mark sweep GC switch. If you want to know more information about the alert, if you mouse over the I under details, you can see what was the formula or the thresholds that were used to trigger that alert. Here we can see this BI server is in a erroneous state, so it's stuck in starting state. So, and then for the individual alerts, so for each section, each analysis type, you'll have individual alerts. The number will let you know how many alerts were triggered in that report. Server and services, so here we could see free disk space on the FRS is low. Just a number of different best practices that we're checking here. Platform search alerts. There's some issues with the continuous crawling is not set to schedule crawling, which is a best practice. Web application server alerts, for example, the maximum heap for the app server is just too low for BI 4.2. So for each section, you have a different alert section. And then let's say we want to get more information. You can click on the different tabs to view the different analysis types. Server and services is for the BI landscape itself, so we can see what hardware is being used, the versions, so we're checking that each server is at the same SP level, the amount of servers by type, server status, and if you click on the individual SIA nodes here, you'll notice something new in the 2.1 version is we're getting information about the BO trace. We're also getting the SIA command line. This is new. All of the placeholders. And then all of the individual properties for each server. So here we could see 3 alerts were triggered for this input FRS. Something else that's new is the Corba IOR stub. So this is useful for troubleshooting when some servers are having trouble communication issues with Corba. And here we can see the alerts that were triggered here. There's low disk space on the FRS directory. Server comparison gives you a quick way to compare server metrics side by side. So let's say we have Webby. We want to make sure all of Webby servers are having the same properties or settings. We can do that really easily with this report. And you can also filter out servers if you want to do that. And then command lines. So this is really useful for troubleshooting. So one thing we check often is to make sure that all the command lines are set correctly. So let's compare 2 DSL bridges and make sure the command lines. So we're actually parsing all of the command lines into individual commands and then comparing them side by side. So let's say we want to see a unique list If you click Unique Value Sort, all of the lines that are, all of the commands that are the same will be on the same line. Ones that are different will be on separate lines. So it makes it really easy to spot differences in command line properties. Content shows us the breakdown of content in the system. So we know what products you're using, all of the different object types, users with the most deleted items, so recycle bin information, oldest content in the recycle bin. Authentication covers the all of the third-party authentication and enterprise configuration. So we can see how is your authentication configured. License key shows you a net functionality provided by all the license keys you have entered into the system, and we're checking things like expiring key codes and that sort of thing. Schedule analysis. So we analyze all of your instances, and this is data that's currently in the CMS system database, not in your auditing database. So we're checking what are the top 10 error messages in your landscape for scheduled objects. We can see here the top one is destination is disabled, and we can, if you mouse over the eye, you can see what report was affected. So we can see this particular report. We need to check the SMTP destination. Also, top 10 Webby error messages, so by Webby report specifically. Top 10 Crystal. Top 10 failing scheduled objects. So this report has 131 failures. If you mouse over, you can see what the error was. Top 10 failing Webby objects, top 10 Crystal reports, and top 10 largest instances. So in your FRS, we can see what's taking up the most data, or most disk space rather, and then the top 10 longest running instances. Hardware gives us a breakdown of all of the hardware you're running, the CPU information, along with metrics, memory details, operating system details, file system details, like I/O information, metrics, that sort of thing, and network card details. And that comes up for each node in the landscape. Platform search, we're doing a number of checks. We're checking all of the information about how you have platform search configured to make sure it's optimal, how you have your APSs configured, and then for troubleshooting the indexing queues, we have all very granular information about how that's performing. Very useful for troubleshooting issues with platform search. Semantic Layer, we're checking for Webby documents that don't have an associated universe. We have a report on connections, so what connections are associated with what universes, and dependencies, universes to their related Webby or documents in general. Not it could be Webby, Crystal reports, Excelsius, etc. Kind of like a metadata manager light, if you will. Patch history gives us a detailed view of what patches you've installed on the system, who installed it, what the build numbers are, what the order of the install was, whether it was an install, an uninstall, a repair, and whether it was committed successfully. And this is really useful for troubleshooting installation issues, so you can see exactly what was installed in what order. CI applications, this is new in the new version. These are all of your applications in the CMC and how they're configured. Timeouts shows us all of the timeouts across your landscape so that we can do things like compare your web application timeout for the Launchpad, for example, compared to your Webby timeout and make sure that things are consistent, your connection timeout, for example. And we can do alerting on things like that. We can also check to see what timeouts have been changed from the default. And finally, the web application server analysis. So pretty much everything that we need to know about your application server, all of your heap settings, your metaspace settings, garbage collection, your JVM, what Java options you have on here, system properties that you have defined, operating system from the perspective of the JVM, class loader, the connectors, AJP or HTTP connectors, protocol handler, and also deployed web applications. So this is new. We're reporting on the individual web apps that you have deployed to Tomcat and also what the version of that is. So that's very useful for knowing if your web app is out of sync with your BI server. Also, if you've made any customizations, like to your Launchpad, for example, that also comes up in here so we can see what custom properties that you set for the application. Okay, so that's the landscape analysis report in a nutshell. So really the goal here is if we get you to run the report like once a week, we keep a record of how things were configured. Well, let's say that you have an issue during the middle of the week. We want to know what's changed. We can come into change analysis. We can compare one day versus another day's landscape report and instantly see what's changed. So here we can see between the two instances, the CMS system database connections have changed. The log level has changed from unspecified to high. The cache cleanup interval on your Webby processing server has been changed. This sort of thing, the NCS level threshold. You can drill down into the report, so we could go to like central management server, and we could see which of the properties have changed. That will be highlighted in yellow. Other reports, for example, hardware. You can see in this case they've applied a service pack to Windows since the last report, and they've disabled or they've turned on DEP or BI applications. We can see Design Studio runtime, items per page has changed, Explorer has changed, and the monitoring has been enabled. So that's just a quick example of what you can do with change analysis. This is one of the most kind of first things that we ask in terms of support is, what have you changed in your system since the problem started? So this is really helpful for that. So one of the biggest requests for running the report was to be able to schedule the report. So now you can actually schedule the report to your BI landscape so it runs inside of BI. So go to Schedule Report. You do need to have 4.1 SP8 or higher or 4.2 or higher because we require SAP JVM 8. You select what reports you want to include in the scheduled or in the landscape analysis report. Choose the frequency. So just like in BI, same options. You can choose when you want to so you can do a recurring, like once a week, for example. Run it at night when off business hours. You can schedule to the enterprise FRS or to an unmanaged disk location. You can send it directly to SAP or you can send it via email. So when you when you run this, it actually will compile a program object on the fly. So we log into the CMS where we want to run this, and it will compile this into a program object and publish it for you. So you don't have to mess with the program object. It just does everything via the client here. So we'll skip over this. So once it's done, you get a kind of feedback here. You can go to your CMC. You can see, okay, there's a new folder. This is my scheduled program object. If we go to history of that object, we can see the instance is running. Oops. And then when you view the success of that, you'll get a kind of a text object that will give you feedback, kind of a log of the instance. So here we can see what actually happened with that scheduled landscape report. So it can be managed. Actually, sorry, if you click on the instance, you can download it, and you get the zip file, and you can view it offline just by viewing the index. And this actually has been improved. I probably won't have time to show you, but this offline view has been improved considerably. You can also manage the instances from the client. So you can see what instances do I have scheduled, and you can delete them directly from the client. So that's the schedule manager. The next thing I want to show you is something that's also brand new. One of the challenges we have with troubleshooting Web Intelligence is we often need your report with data in order to reproduce a particular bug. So, and sometimes that's just not possible because of sensitive data. So we've developed a obfuscating Webby data masker. So now you can actually use the platform tool to obfuscate the data in the report, and it retains the formula values so that we can still reproduce issues. So you come to Webby Data Masker under Landscape Tools, log into your central management server. Then you have a folder view of your BI platform repository. You can choose what documents you want to obfuscate or to data mask, and the destination of where you want that doc to go, so it'll create a copy of it. One thing it also does is creates a Excel data source for that report so that we can actually run the report at SAP. There's quite a few different parameters you can choose, so if you go to Help, you'll see what the different options are for that. And then just you run the masker, and it'll start to process. So we can mask things like the data, the numbers, the metadata, report constants. You'll get a log file talking about the operations that happened during the masking. Then we can go to the Launchpad and view our credit card report, and we can see that, and we obviously don't want to send SAP credit card numbers, and the report has been obfuscated. So the Universe Analyzer allows us to test the integrity of your universe against the data source that it's based on. This has been improved since this video was taken, but you can analyze either a UNV or a UNX, and what it does is basically crawls through your universe and will connect to the database via the connection server, and will validate, basically do an integrity check on all the objects in the universe, and then give you a report back on if there's any particular issues. Also, that's new in the 2.1 version is you can select what universes you want to analyze. Previously, it would just do everything, and it could take a long time. Now you can just select which ones you want to analyze, and then it will only analyze those. Okay. Connections Analyzer. So let's say we want to test all of our connections in the BI platform and make sure that they're all still valid and all working. So we go to Connections Analyzer. Connect to our BI landscape. It will make a connection to your connection servers and then test each of the connections to make sure that they're still valid. So it's similar to doing it from the Universe Designer or the Information Design tool, but in this case, it's doing it on the server, on the connection server, and testing the connection there. If you have any issues with your data access layer or SBO files or things like that, it will show up here. Okay, so that's the Connections Analyzer. So dependencies. When you're promoting objects or upgrading, or just sometimes it's useful to know what is the dependent objects for another object. So with the Dependencies Analyzer, we can come in and we can pick a particular object. So let's say Webby documents. We want to know what are its dependencies. So here we can see the Adventure BL UNX, the Adventure Con connection, and the couple folders. These are all dependent objects. Charting samples, we can see the eFashion universe, eFashion connection, or Lumira, the LUMS file. So just a useful little tool here. It also does a check to make sure the dependent objects exist in the FRS. If there is an object in the FRS, it will make sure that the file still exists there. So let's say you're troubleshooting a security issue. You don't understand why a particular one user in one group has access to something, but a user in another group does not. You can use the Security Analyzer to do kind of a diff. So we'll log into the CMS. You'll get a folder structure of your BI platform. So let's find a report here. So we're going to do the sales folder. And we're going to say administrators. Or sorry, we're going to say the everyone group. We can see the everyone group has no access to the sales folder. And then let's compare that to the business analyst group. So here we can see everyone has no access, but the business analyst group has all of the access listed in blue. So it's a quick way to compare two groups and get a diff on the different access. You can see the one you're comparing to is highlighted in a different color to make it easy to see. You can also compare access for users. So if I just want to say like Toby, and then that will give you the net rights, including all the inherited rights for that user, and then you can compare that to another user. So we can see that Toby only has edit objects, delete instances, whereas user 5 has all of the other advanced rights. Okay, so that's the Security Analyzer. Oh, I forgot to mention you can export the results to Excel. For example, if you want to send it to SAP support, you can do that. So let's say you're troubleshooting firewall communication. We have a tool called the Communication Analyzer, and we can do two things. One, we can test a direct connection and a port directly from the client. So here I'll just test server name on 6400, click test, it'll give you a pass or fail. Or let's say that this is a client where I'm running the UDT or IDT, and we need to configure the firewall or test the firewall. But we can connect to the CMS. Well, you connect to the CMS via the execute button, and it will pull back the entire landscape and then give you a report on and test the connection to all of the servers all at the same time. So you'll get a report, what was working in terms of communication to the request port, to the Corba ports, or to the name server port rather, what the IP address the server is bound to, so we can make sure that all of the servers on a particular host are bound to the same IP address, which is critical. And we can see what is the decoded Corba IOR stub, which is helpful for troubleshooting Corba communication issues. This can be exported, so we can hit the Save button, export this, and then send the results to SAP. So very little handy tool for troubleshooting communication issues. One thing we recommend that you do is to alias your third-party user groups. So let's say we have Active Directory groups mapped in. We want to alias the users with an enterprise alias in case the Active Directory group gets unmapped. The user will disappear. So here we can come in and we can do all of the third-party authentication types or only some of them. So you can choose what you want to alias, or you can also remove aliases if you want. You select what you want to alias. Skip into that. And then you can set a password for the enterprise alias, or you can use a random password so that nobody knows what the password for each individual enterprise alias would be. Useful for like trusted authentication. You can also disable the enterprise alias that's created. It respects the BI platform password rules. So you have to put in a proper password if you're using a password. And then once it's completed, it will give you a text file to let you know all of the aliases that were created. Let's see here. The last thing that we'll demo is the end-to-end trace wizard. So if you've dealt with SAP support, they've asked you to create an end-to-end trace. If you have a really big environment, that can take a long time because you have to collect the log files from each of the servers and update the BO traces and that sort of thing. So this tool basically automates that process. So you choose what landscape you're going to do an end-to-end trace against. The SAP Client plugin is built in. We can choose we want to use a host agent to collect log files or a shared folder. It will also record a video of your end-to-end trace workflow. So not only do we get the end-to-end trace, but we get a video of the workflow that matches. You can customize what BO trace you want to be set on the server, what the settings are, how many concurrent threads are collecting log files. So if you have plenty of network bandwidth, you can crank that up and makes it a little faster. You can also choose how old of log files that you want to collect, like 4 days old worth of log files. It will detect if you have IE open and ask you to close it. You hit OK. It launches the SAP Client plugin. This part of the workflow is the same as when you do it manually. So here we're just going to record a logon to the launchpad. And then once you're done, you go next. It automatically detects what the transaction, and it will collect the log files. And it will give you a report on. So here we can see the report on the logs. Here I'm showing that we've restored the original BO trace back to the original. And then you can click on this, and then your log files will be stored in that directory. The directory is named after the transaction. So let's see, how much time do we have? Oh. So here I'm showing you, so we've got our trace files that we've collected. We've added them into the GLF viewer or Flexi log reader, and then we can filter on the transaction ID. And here we can see we've got an end-to-end trace that combines trace log from the application server, the CMS, and all of the servers that were involved in the workflow. And then finally, it zips everything up, including the business transaction XML. And then in the folder is also a video file. So we can click on the video. You can view the video using the screen recorder tool inside of the platform support tool. And then here we're viewing a video of the workflow. I guess the last thing to touch on is the Authentication Wizards. If you're setting up third-party authentication, single sign-on, this wizard will walk you through and collect all the information that you need to set that up. So if you connect to your landscape, it will collect the information, ask you to provide some information, and then it will generate a customized tutorial document that you just follow to finish the setup. And it will also generate an email that you send off to your basis admin or to your domain admin to do the necessary changes on the domain controller or BW or whatever the case might be. So it really simplifies the process of configuring third-party authentication. And with that, I think we are right at the end of time.